I was halfway through my morning coffee when I heard the unmistakable roar of a chainsaw. It wasn't the pleasant, distant hum of a neighbor cutting firewood, it was close, too close. The kind of close that makes your stomach lurch before your brain catches up. My gut was right. I sprang up from my porch and rushed toward the source of the noise. And there she was, Karen, my brand new neighbor, in a neon pink windbreaker, oversized sunglasses, and the confidence of a demolition expert who had no idea what they were doing. She stood at the base of a towering oak tree right on our shared property line, gripping a chainsaw like it was a microphone at a karaoke night. "I got this!" she shouted over the machine's deafening whir, as if I had asked for reassurance. I had not. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" I bellowed, skidding to a stop a few feet away from her. She grinned, flipping her sunglasses onto her head like she was about to give a TED Talk. "This tree is a hazard. It's leaning." It was not. "It's on my land," she added. It was also not. Before I could argue, she revved the chainsaw and took another hack at the trunk. A massive, splintering crack split through the air. My heart dropped into my boot. "Karen, stop. That tree's gonna fall the wrong way." She waved me off with the casual arrogance of someone who ignored all warning labels. "Relax, I watched a tutorial." I didn't know what tutorial she had watched, but judging by the sound the tree was making, it had failed to mention the part where gravity doesn't care about online confidence. Then it happened. The tree groaned, tilted, and not in the safe, controlled direction she had likely imagined. Instead, the massive oak twisted, its weight shifting unpredictably. I had seen enough trees fall in my lifetime to know there was no stopping it now. "Karen, run!" I yelled. She gasped, finally realizing that she had no control over what she had just set in motion. She dropped the chainsaw and bolted, arms flailing like a cartoon character escaping a stampede. But the damage was done. With an earth-shaking crash, the tree came down, not into Karen's yard, not harmlessly onto the empty field, but straight onto my barn. The impact was deafening. Wood splintered. A section of the roof caved in like a stomped-on soda can. A panicked chorus of my livestock erupted from inside. Dust and debris shot into the air, momentarily blinding me. I coughed and stumbled forward, my pulse hammering in my ears. My barn. My damn barn. Karen, catching her breath, brushed the dirt off her neon windbreaker and gave me a sheepish look. "Wow. That came down fast." I turned to her, disbelief warring with a fury so strong I had to clench my fists at my sides to keep from grabbing the nearest shovel. "You think?" She sighed dramatically. "Well, you should have warned me better." I nearly choked. "Warned you? I was literally yelling at you to stop." She crossed her arms, as if this was a minor disagreement and not a full-blown catastrophe. "Technically, the tree was kinda on my side." I pointed at the destruction. "Technically, that's my barn under your kinda tree." She pursed her lips and looked at the wreckage as if she had just noticed it for the first time. "Huh. Yeah, I see what you're saying." A loud banging noise came from inside the barn, followed by a distressed moo. My stomach twisted. I sprinted toward the barn doors, yanking them open with all the force I could muster. Inside, my cows and horses were panicked, their eyes wide and rolling in terror. A few sections of the wooden stalls had been smashed. Miraculously, no animals appeared to be seriously hurt, but they were shaken, stomping and snorting in distress. Behind me, Karen peered in. "Oh, they're fine. Just a little spooked." I turned slowly, inhaling sharply through my nose. "Get off my land." She laughed like I was joking. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's just a barn. You can rebuild." I took a step toward her, and for the first time, she seemed to realize that maybe, just maybe, she had made a mistake. "I'm calling the sheriff," I said, already pulling my phone from my pocket. Her face twisted. "Wait, what? No, that's unnecessary. I mean, it was an accident. You can't sue someone over an accident." I pressed the call button. "Watch me." 15 minutes later, Sheriff Duncan arrived in his dusty patrol truck, stepping out with the careful reluctance of a man who had been dragged into one too many neighbor dispute. His eyes flicked from me, fuming, to Karen, who had adopted the expression of a wounded puppy. "What happened here?" he asked, taking in the mess. I opened my mouth, but Karen got there first. "Jack threatened me," she blurted. My jaw nearly hit the dirt. "What?" She put a hand on her chest, eyes wide with fake innocence. "He came running at me, yelling, 'Stop!' in a really aggressive way. I felt so unsafe." Sheriff Duncan gave her a long, tired look. "And what exactly were you doing when he was yelling, 'Stop'?" She hesitated. Cutting the tree." "And what happened after that?" he pressed. She pointed at the barn. "Well, the tree kinda landed there." The sheriff rubbed his temples. "Karen, you cut down a tree without permission, on a property line, and it destroyed a man's barn." She scoffed. "You're making it sound worse than it is." "It is exactly as bad as it sounds," I snapped. The sheriff sighed and turned to me. "You got insurance?" I clenched my jaw. "Not for neighbor-induced barn collapse." Karen brightened. "Oh, but that should be a thing. You know, just in case someone else ever does this." The sheer stupidity of the moment nearly made my brain short-circuit. "Sheriff, she needs to pay for the damages," I said through gritted teeth. Karen gasped like I had just suggested she donate a kidney. "Pay? Oh no, no, no. This was an act of nature." The sheriff narrowed his eyes. "Nature didn't wield that chainsaw." She threw her hands up. "Well, what am I supposed to do? I can't afford to fix it." A slow, cold realization settled in my chest. Karen wasn't just reckless, she was a disaster in human form. And if I didn't do something, she was going to keep finding ways to ruin my life. I met her gaze. "Then get ready. Because I'm taking this to court." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Wait. Let's be reasonable." I turned and walked away before I did something that would land me in jail. Behind me, Karen huffed. "You're overreacting. It's just a barn." I didn't stop. My barn was gone. My animals were shaken. And now I had a battle ahead. Karen had no idea who she was messing with. The sun had barely risen when I dragged myself out of bed, still fuming over yesterday's disaster. My barn, my livestock, my peace. All of it shattered because Karen had decided to play amateur lumberjack. The only thing keeping me from losing my mind was the fact that I had already started the legal process. But until that played out, I had a wrecked barn to deal with. I grabbed my work gloves and headed outside. The smell of splintered wood and dust still hung heavy in the air. The massive oak tree lay across what used to be a sturdy structure, now a mess of broken beams and scattered hay. The animals were safe for now, but their temporary shelter wouldn't last long. I had work to do. I climbed onto the wreckage, trying to figure out the best way to start clearing it. That's when I noticed something strange. Among the broken boards, beneath a section of collapsed wall, a metal corner peeked out. At first, I thought it was just an old toolbox, but as I pulled away more debris, I realized it was much bigger. An old, rusted metal chest was wedged between two shattered beams. It looked ancient, covered in decades of dirt and grime. Curiosity got the best of me. I heaved the chest out of the wreckage and set it on solid ground. The lid was locked, but there was a small keyhole in the front. I ran my fingers over the surface, feeling the weight of history pressing against my palms. My grandfather had always told stories about hidden things on the ranch, old secrets, lost valuables, but I had always thought he was just spinning tales. Now I wasn't so sure. I didn't have a key, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I grabbed a crowbar from the shed and wedged it into the lid. With a grunt, I pushed down, and the lock snapped with a satisfying crack. I lifted the lid, and my breath caught in my throat. Inside, neatly stacked, were old documents yellowed with age. Beneath them, nestled carefully, was a small wooden box with an intricate engraving on the top. I picked it up, my heart pounding. Slowly, I flipped open the lid, revealing a single antique key resting on a faded piece of parchment. I unfolded the paper, my eyes scanning the words written in elegant, old-fashioned script. The note was from my great-grandfather. It spoke of something hidden deep within the land, something valuable enough to be locked away for generations. My eyes flicked to the key, my mind racing. If this was real, if there was something buried on my property, it could change everything. Before I could process it all, a loud, exaggerated gasp made me spin around. Karen stood a few feet away, wearing an obnoxiously bright tracksuit, holding a coffee cup like she had just casually wandered onto my land. "Well, well, well," she said, taking a slow sip. "Looks like someone found something interesting." I clenched my jaw. "Karen, why are you here?" She shrugged, stepping closer. "Oh, just checking on the damage. Making sure you weren't over-exaggerating it for your little lawsuit." Her eyes flicked to the chest. "But this is interesting." I moved in front of the chest, blocking her view. "None of your business." Karen gave me an innocent smile, which I had already learned meant she was absolutely up to something. "Oh, come on. If it was buried in the barn, maybe it was meant to be found by whoever owns the land now. And well, given our little property dispute, maybe we should." No, I didn't let her finish. Her expression darkened for a split second before she plastered the fake smile back on. "Fine, fine. Be that way. But if I were you, I'd be careful with whatever that is. Old secrets can be dangerous." I didn't know what she meant by that, and I didn't care. Karen had already done enough damage. I picked up the chest and started walking toward my house, making it clear the conversation was over. She huffed but didn't push further. For now. Once inside, I locked the door behind me and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the key. My mind raced through possibilities. Treasure? Important documents? A deed to land? Whatever it was important enough for my ancestors to lock it away. I needed to find out where this key led. I spent hours going through the documents, piecing together clues. Eventually, I found what I was looking for, a hand-drawn map of the ranch. My eyes traced the familiar landmarks until I found it. A small X was marked near an old, abandoned well that I hadn't paid much attention to in years. That had to be it. Excitement built in my chest, but I knew I couldn't rush this. If Karen had already sniffed something out, she wouldn't stop. I needed to be careful. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, replaying everything over and over. I needed to get to that well before Karen did. At the crack of dawn, I grabbed my tools and made my way toward the well. The air was crisp, the kind of morning that should have been peaceful, if not for the paranoia that Karen was probably watching me. The well stood old and forgotten, half covered in overgrown vines. I cleared away the debris and examined the structure. At the base, there was a small, rusted metal compartment. My heart pounded as I fit the key into the lock. It clicked, and the door creaked open. Inside was a small, locked chest. My hands trembled as I pulled it out and placed it on the ground. But before I could open it, I heard a sound behind me. A twig snap. I turned just in time to see Karen, shovel in hand, trying to act casual as if she hadn't been sneaking up on me. "Wow," she said, feigning surprise. "What are the chances we'd both be here?" I clenched my fist. "Karen, get off my property." She ignored me, her eyes locked on the chest. "That looks important." I had had enough. "You have 5 seconds to leave." Karen tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You sure you want to be so aggressive, Jack? I mean, what if I call the sheriff and tell him you threaten me again?" She smiled, sickly sweet. "You wouldn't want that, would you?" I exhaled slowly, gripping the chest. "I have work to do." She watched me for a long moment before finally sighing dramatically. "Fine. But I'll be back. This land might not be as much yours as you think." I waited until she was gone before kneeling beside the chest. I took a deep breath and pried it open. Inside were neatly stacked silver coins, old enough to be worth a fortune. Beneath them, a bundle of documents that looked even more valuable. And at the bottom, a sealed letter addressed to me. I unfolded it carefully, my great-grandfather's words jumping out at me. If you are reading this, you were meant to find it. This land is more than just property, it holds history, wealth, and danger. Protect it, and be wary of those who would try to take it from you. I tightened my grip on the paper. My family had left me more than just land. They had left me a legacy. And now I had to fight for it. And Karen? She had no idea what she had just started. The morning air was crisp as I stood near the old well, staring at the open chest before me. The silver coins, the aged documents, and the letter from my great-grandfather felt like they had unlocked something far bigger than just an inheritance. This wasn't just about money. It was about the land itself, the history tied to it, and the fight I now knew I was in for. Karen had already proven she wasn't going to back off, and I had no doubt she would be back, ready to sink her claws into something that didn't belong to her. I carefully placed everything back into the chest, locking it with the key and tucking it under my arm. The last thing I needed was for Karen to come snooping around again while I was gone. I made my way back to the house, keeping an eye on my surroundings, fully expecting her to pop out from behind a tree or some other ridiculous hiding spot. By the time I got inside, I had already decided on my next move. I needed to find out exactly what these documents meant, and if they had any legal standing in my upcoming battle with Karen. I spread them across the kitchen table, carefully looking them over. Some appeared to be land deeds, old maps, and records of ownership dating back over 100 years. But one document in particular caught my eye. It had my great-grandfather's name on it, along with a detailed breakdown of land divisions. As I traced the lines with my fingers, my heart nearly stopped. Karen's property wasn't actually hers. At least, not in the way she thought. The document detailed an agreement between my great-grandfather and a previous owner, an agreement that had never been transferred properly in legal records. The land Karen claimed as hers, including the section where she had cut down the tree, was still technically part of my ranch. She had been trespassing this entire time. The realization hit me like a freight train. If this document held up in court, not only could I make her pay for the damage, but I could also prove that she had no right to the land she had been so protective of. The thought of her reaction made me grin. Before I could dwell on it any longer, a loud knocking on my front door made me tense. I knew that knock. I opened the door, and there she was, standing with her arms crossed and her usual self-righteous expression. "I have a proposition," Karen announced. I leaned against the doorframe. "Not interested," she scoffed. "You haven't even heard it yet." "I don't need to," I said flatly. "I know how your propositions go." She sighed dramatically. "Look, we've had our differences, but it's time we act like adults." I raised an eyebrow. "Like the time you cut down my tree and destroyed my barn?" She waved a hand dismissively. "That's in the past. It was 2 days ago." "Exactly. Ancient history." She put on her most practiced smile. "Let's talk about the future." I folded my arms. "I'm listening." Karen glanced around, as if checking to see if anyone else was watching. "I want to buy a portion of your land." I stared at her, trying to determine if she had finally lost what little sense she had left. "You want to what?" She nodded, as if this were a completely rational request. "Look, I know there's been some confusion about property lines. So instead of going through all that legal hassle, why don't we just settle this now? I'll make you an offer. You sell me the land around the tree, and we call it even." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A full, deep laugh that only seemed to irritate her more. "What's so funny?" she demanded. I shook my head. "Karen, I just found paperwork proving that land isn't even legally yours to begin with." Her face twitched. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" I asked, stepping back and grabbing the old document from my table. I held it up for her to see. "This says otherwise." She leaned in, squinting at the paper. "Where did you get that?" My great-grandfather left it for me. I smirked. Seems like he knew someone like you would show up one day. Karen's mouth opened and closed, her mind scrambling for a response. Finally, she settled on what she did best, playing the victim. This is unfair. You're using some dusty old paper to try and take what's mine. I leaned in slightly. Karen, that land was never yours. She let out a frustrated groan. Fine. If you want to play dirty, I'll fight back. You're not the only one who can get a lawyer, you know. I nodded. Good. Because mine is already drafting the lawsuit. Her eyes widened. Wait, you're serious? Dead serious. I crossed my arms. And if I were you, I'd start packing. She stared at me for a long moment, her mind clearly racing through her options. Then, just like that, she turned on her heel and stormed away, muttering under her breath about injustice and conspiracy theories. I watched her go, a weight lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't over, not yet. But it was close. The legal battle stretched on for weeks, but in the end, the documents spoke for themselves. The court ruled in my favor, confirming that the land Karen had built her house on was never properly transferred. She had two choices: buy it from me at full market price or leave. She chose to leave. The day she packed up and moved out was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. She threw one last dramatic fit, claiming she was the victim of a small-town conspiracy, but no one bought it. The sheriff, who had been dealing with her nonsense for too long, was practically smiling as he watched her drive off. Once she was gone, peace finally settled back over my ranch. I repaired my barn, moved my livestock back in, and took a moment to breathe, knowing that Karen would never be able to pull another stunt again. But the best part? The hidden treasure my great-grandfather had left behind wasn't just money. It was history. Proof of my family's legacy. Proof that this land was always meant to stay in the right hands. As I stood on my porch, looking out over the land I had fought for, I knew one thing for sure. This ranch would never belong to anyone but me.